Sheryl Sandberg bursts onto the scene with the unapologetic confidence of someone who's just crashed the boys' club to hand out empowerment lattes. She doesn't open with a meek plea for equality but rather with an invitation to rewrite the rules of play. From the outset, Sandberg makes it clear that the world of work has been built by men, for men, and it's high time women picked up the blueprints and tore out the parts that don't serve them. She peels back the veneer of corporate politeness to reveal the stubborn scaffolding of systemic bias. It's as if entire industries are haunted by ghosts of decisions made in boardrooms where only one gender set foot. Sandberg doesn't mince words. When job descriptions demand strong leadership, they often translate to behaves like a man, and that unconscious code keeps women perpetually on the outside looking in. That nagging whisper of self-doubt is next on her metaphorical chopping block. Imposter syndrome, she declares, is the unwelcome party guest who shows up uninvited and refuses to leave, convincing women they're illusions rather than achievements. By exposing how these internal saboteurs feed on the lack of visible role models, Sandberg encourages readers to learn the art of evicting self-doubt and making space for authentic confidence. Sandberg then turns her sharp gaze on the rigid structures that pretend to be neutral. The always-on culture, the unspoken expectation of after-hours emails, the labyrinth of insufficient childcare, all conspire to carve women out of leadership pipelines. She wryly notes that workplaces have mastered the art of pretending flexibility is equally available to everyone, even as the glass ceiling quietly thickens overhead. Armed with data that reads like a detective novel, Sandberg lays out the cold, hard statistics: fewer women in C-suites, fewer raises, fewer board seats. But these numbers aren't mere curiosities, they're battle scars that point to specific skirmishes yet to be won. Her charts and graphs don't just illustrate the problem, they arm readers with the facts needed to demand change. To breathe life into the numbers, Sandberg stitches in stories of real women who have navigated these minefields. From a marketing exec who negotiated her first $1 million budget to an engineer who convinced her team to embrace a 4-day workweek, these vignettes feel less like case studies and more like roadmaps drawn in bold highlighter. Negotiation itself becomes a secret superpower under Sandberg's tutelage. She treats the ask like a well-choreographed dance rather than a bungled grovel, offering scripts and strategies that transform shaky pitches into confident declarations of worth. Asking for the raise isn't a guilty transaction, it's a rightful claim to the fruits of one's labor. Mentorship emerges as another cornerstone of her blueprint. Sandberg champions the pairing of seasoned navigators with eager explorers, arguing that the right mentor can act like a human GPS in the bewildering terrain of corporate politics. But she doesn't stop there. She elevates sponsorship, where mentors become active champions who propel protégés into rooms they might never find alone. Building coalitions takes center stage when Sandberg introduces the concept of lean-in circles. These intimate gatherings of peers function as miniature think tanks, where ambitions are nurtured, war stories exchanged, and collective energy ignited. In these circles, women learn that success isn't a solo sprint but a relay run powered by shared insight. Sandberg also urges each reader to craft her own definition of success, steering clear of the one-size-fits-all trophy case society offers. Whether it's balancing boardroom triumphs with backyard barbecues or defining leadership as mentorship rather than command, she insists that personal values must anchor professional goals. Transforming organizational culture, she argues, requires more than passive policy tweaks. It demands visible buy-in from the top, measurable accountability, and the courage to punch holes in outdated norms. Sandberg's corporate manifesto calls for metrics that track progress on gender parity just as vigilantly as they track revenue growth. Subtle microaggressions receive a spotlight of their own, those tiny pinpricks of bias that accumulate until they feel like a full-blown siege. Sandberg dissects the double binds: be assertive and you're aggressive, be collaborative and you're weak, teaching women to navigate these traps with tactical grace. Men, far from being the adversaries in her story, are cast as essential allies. Sandberg challenges male leaders to lean in themselves, to sponsor qualified women, and to examine how their own unconscious biases reproduce the barriers they claim to oppose. It's an enlistment call that refuses to let anyone off the hook. The book doesn't ignore the emotional toll of this work. Sandberg acknowledges the burnout, the guilt, the moments of despair, offering practical advice on resilience and self-care. She frames these not as luxurious add-ons but as essential components of sustained leadership. In her final flourish, Sandberg's tone shifts from critique to rally. She paints a vision of workplaces where diverse voices shape strategies, where flexibility is standard, and where leadership reflects the full spectrum of human talent. Her closing pages feel less like an endpoint than like the first chapter of a shared journey, inviting every reader to take up the mantle and join the march.